Jury deliberations are now underway after lead prosecutor Linda DUNIKOSKI presented her rebuttal argument for the prosecution this morning. For more on what we can expect as we wait for a verdict, let's bring in ABC's Alex Presha, as well as ABC News contributor and managing partner of the Cochrane firm, Channa Lloyd. Thanks both for joining us. And Alex, let me start with you. You've been there outside the courthouse throughout this trial, so you've got a really good feel for it. What are you hearing as the trial nears a verdict? What did you make of the prosecutor's summation, and how does it feel there?
Well, Terry, right now, I'd say there is a quiet energy here outside the Glenn County Courthouse. There are a couple dozen folks gathered behind me. It's a notably different crowd than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday, you know, we talked about how we saw the members of the new Black Panther Party with long guns marching around the courthouse. It was a loud enough commotion that the judge was able to hear it from inside the courthouse. That's why the jury's deliberating internally. Well, some of those same members out here, but instead of seeing the rifles and the long guns, we saw them carrying flowers and balloons to make a makeshift memorial to Ahmaud Arbery today. But again, I mean, now it's the waiting game, right? And there's no telling how long it's going to take this jury to come to a verdict on all 9 of these counts. And so I think right now what you're seeing is this immediate energy of the rebuttal coming to a close, is heading to the jury, and people anticipating whenever news breaks of the jury actually reaching a verdict. And with that said, I will say that we've seen members of the defense teams come out and hang out on the courthouse steps. Moments ago, we actually got a chance to speak with Kevin Gough. He's attorney representing William Roddy Bryant. Actually, we got a chance to ask him specifically. You heard about that motion that he raised to sever from the McMichaels right before both sides rested. We asked him about that. Take a listen right here.
Really, until the last day of the trial and the evidence that was presented, without going into the details of that, really until the charge conference on Friday, it wasn't really clear how things were going. And, you know, we do what we feel we need to do at the time. We file the motion, the court's rule, we move on. You know, no use looking back. What we're doing is looking forward, and we're looking forward to Roddy Bryant coming home this afternoon with his family. Thank you. Thank y'all.
Well, and certainly Kevin Gough right there projecting an air of confidence on his end, on behalf of his client. I think you would hear similar things from the attorneys for the McMichaels as well. But one thing that was of note, Stephanie, is that he was asked, I mean, how is Roddy Bryant processing this? And he said that Roddy's having a hard time. And look, I mean, he talked about even in his closing that Roddy was kind of simple in his life, and so this whole trial has been kind of difficult for him. One other thing that he said, though, was that he felt for the Arbery family, knowing that the images and some of the things that were talked about in this trial must have been difficult for both Wanda Cooper Jones and Marcus Arbery to stomach. And, you know, that's the first time since I've been covering this that we've heard Kevin Gough directly relate or try to empathize with the Arbery family. Noted that first week where he made the comments about Black pastors who were comforting the Arbery family inside the courtroom and having objections to that. But today, as this trial and this has been handed over essentially to the jury, having some sort of empathy for the Arbery family was something else that stood out this afternoon. Stephanie?
Yes, Alex, and we'll see how those emotions play into the jury's decision whenever that comes down. Channa, we want to turn to you. Earlier today, we heard from the state prosecutor. She presented her rebuttal, during which she reiterated that the McMichaels and William Roddy Bryant didn't have the probable cause to make a citizen's arrest on Ahmaud Arbery. She also emphasized the importance of the law and holding the defendants accountable. We have a clip of that. Let's take a listen.
If you're going to take the law into your own hands, you better know what the law is. This isn't about whether these 3 men are good people or bad people. That's not what this is about. It's about responsibility. It's about holding people accountable and responsible for their actions.
Channa, the state prosecutor had 2 hours for her rebuttal. We were wondering whether she was going to take up that time or less than that. It seems as though she took up the 2 hours. In your opinion, was that effective? And what type of image would a not guilty verdict portray to the rest of the country?
I think that first, what Ms. DUNIKOSKI did was very smart. I think she used her time, she used it smartly, because once the defense got up to do their closing arguments, they very much tried to humanize these defendants to the jury. They made them say, you know, they said things like, well, Travis McMichaels had, you know, extended his hand to people in the past as a Coast Guard, you know, personnel. So you need to extend your hand to him. Things like that make the jury think about the fact that, you know, there is a punishment attached to this verdict. Although the jury's not in charge of punishment, it does play in their minds. So I think what she did was combat that by reminding the jury that their responsibility is to determine whether these defendants are accountable or not. And that is really all they should be focused on. They should not be focused on punishment, because sometimes that can affect the way jurors might decide and when they deliberate on what type of verdict to bring back. A not guilty verdict in this case, I think, is going to stoke racial tensions across the U.S., because I think that there is a feeling of responsibility and accountability that needs to be had, especially seeing as that they were acting under the citizen's arrest law that we know has such a nefarious past. And the purpose of it being written was, you know, back in days of slavery. So I think that when we look at that in totality, a not guilty verdict is going to send certain people in certain portions of our population further into disenfranchisement. So I think that a not guilty verdict will have repercussions much more far-reaching than just the city that the case is taking place in.
And Alex, I wonder if the kind of impact that Channa is talking about was not made more likely, or whether the tensions in this trial were ratcheted up more yesterday, when in this trial we heard closing arguments from all three of the defense attorneys representing Greg McMichael and his son Travis McMichael. Travis is the shooter. They were in one pickup truck. And William Roddy Bryan Jr., the neighbor. So Laura Hogue, the lawyer for Greg McMichael, I'll never forget it, used her time to speak to the jury, and she seemed to me to vilify Ahmaud Arbery. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Turning Ahmaud Arbery into a victim after the choices that he made does not reflect the reality of what brought Ahmaud Arbery to Satilla Shores in his khaki shorts with no socks to cover his long, dirty toenails. No one but Ahmaud Arbery made the decision to repeatedly and unlawfully enter into that house over and over again. No one but Ahmaud Arbery made the decision to run like the wind when the police car responded to the calls from the owner and the neighbors. No one but Ahmaud Arbery made the decision to either reach for or certainly give the very real impression that he was reaching for a handgun on February 11th, and then to yet again run away when the police arrived. And no one but Ahmaud Arbery made the decision not to stop when Travis's truck rolled up beside him. To wait, to tell the police what he was doing there, or just plain run away into the woods.
It still kind of just boggles the mind there, Alex. While Laura Hogue said right after that passage she's not trying to blame Ahmaud Arbery for his own death, she just blamed Ahmaud Arbery for his own death. It sounded to me, and my concern yesterday for her client was that there might be jurors who resent that, who think, look, she's desperate. She's trying to dirty up this defendant because she doesn't have the goods to defend him with. What do you make of what she had to say?
Well, I think your concerns, Terry, are valid because we saw how the Arbery family reacted to this, right? It was inflammatory, and it was for Wanda Cooper Jones, who has been in that courtroom for so much of this trial. You think of the graphic video that we saw that very first week, whether it be the initial video that William Roddy Bryant shot, the first responding officers, the crime scene photos, then the images from the medical examiner. She was in for almost all, if not all of it. But that particular comment, when she heard defense attorney Hogue talk about long, dirty toenails, was enough for her to go, wow, and get up and leave the courtroom. And so you have to wonder the impact of not just that kind of descriptor, but also victim blaming here. I think, you know, for the vast majority of this trial, the defense has walked a really thin line by trying to humanize their clients without really painting Ahmaud Arbery in a derogatory way, and that yesterday was definitely a moment that for the Arbery family and for their supporters crossed a line.
And Channa, obviously every jury is different, the makeup is different, their backgrounds are different, but do you see Laura Hogue vilifying Ahmaud Arbery this way to the jury as some sort of a strategy that she clearly is hoping to be effective?
I mean, clearly she's hoping that it'll be effective on some level to some juror that's sitting there. The only part about her closing that I really don't think is going to sit well with the jurors is, at the end of the day, there was no evidence to corroborate some of the statements. So this idea that she had to make these sort of personal statements and personal derogatory statements towards someone who's passed, I think for the average juror is going to be a little bit above repugnant, because for the most part, you know, people have respect for those that have passed despite the circumstances. So I think that when she took those personal attacks towards the Ahmaud Arbery who has passed, I think that never sits well with a jury, because it seems as though you're reaching for personal attacks because you don't have anything credible to say. Because if you had had evidence of these things, then you would have brought that out during closing. You know, and I think she actually got very close to the line. You know, that statement she made about his decline, a mother remembering him as someone who was a good child, and then his decline into the 20s, stepped very close to some information that they had determined was not going to be entered into the trial. So I was actually very surprised to see her take that tact as well.
As were we as we watched, because it was interesting to see not much of Ahmaud's background was shared, but we did hear that. ABC's Alex Presha and managing partner of the Cochran firm, Channa Lloyd, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.